If you're watching this video and you're creating content at any level, whether you're doing a podcast, YouTube, or social media, all of it, writing a book, doesn't matter what it is, any type of content that you're doing, and you're looking to maybe gain more reach into other audiences that are very similar to yours and, specifically in your niche or at least in your industry, then collaborating with other creators is going to be one of the best routes to make sure that that gets done and you're reaching into other audiences that are extremely relevant to yours. Now, there's some etiquette when it comes to collaborating with other creators, so that's what we're going to go over today. So the first thing I'm going to say is make sure that it's a very specific person that is in your niche, or at least in your industry. For example, when I get on my podcast, the REI Marketing Weekly, I work 100% with active real estate investors, people that are in the real estate investing space, flipping houses, wholesaling, doing rentals, teaching other people how to do it, whatever it is. They're in the real estate investing space in some way, shape, or form. So when I have my podcast and I get guests on my show, I'm specifically handpicking those people, reaching out to them myself and asking them to come on my show because they are in my space and maybe they have an audience themselves. Or a really good strategy that's a little bit of a secret is I like to get people on my show that I really want to work with that maybe I'm not potentially working with at the moment. Additionally, I do get my clients on the show because the people that I do work with are qualified to be on my podcast. So it makes sense to collaborate with those people to get them on my show because they're within my niche and they're reaching in my audience. So that's the number one focus that I would make sure that you look at is whatever audiences that you're reaching, look at who else is creating content in your space that is reaching similar audiences and go after those people. Now, there's a little bit of curvature to this too, is because you could maybe stitch together, like take for instance, maybe you have like Gatorade and you have Nike, where Gatorade is servicing a product specifically to quench your thirst and it's a drink and it's in kind of the food industry, whereas Nike is in the sportswear industry and they're, specifically targeting athletes for cleats, for basketball shoes, for gear, whatever it is. But those audiences do cross over a lot because most people that drink Gatorade, in the past, right? Now it's a little bit different, but most people that drink Gatorade are going to be in the athletic field in some way, shape, or form. So it does make sense that if Nike and Gatorade, which they have collaborated, if they collaborate in some form or fashion, it does make sense for them because their audiences are very similar. So it's not just that you have the same product or you have the very exact same, type of product or service, but at least if they cross over in some way, shape, or form, that's where it makes sense. Great example is I had a guest on my show who he is specifically in the financial space and he doesn't actively invest in real estate himself. However, he works with real estate investors with his service, so it made sense to get him on my show because his services do service the exact same people that I service in my services. It does make sense to get him on my show because we're essentially servicing the same audience in a nutshell. So that's very, very much like the number one thing that you have to focus on. Think about, does this person that I'm collaborating with actually serve my audience in some way, shape, or form? And if they do, then make the move and start to reach out to them and ask to collaborate on content. Now, obviously, the next question might be, well, what type of content do I collaborate on? This is where you can get a little bit on the creative side, right? There's the obvious, like getting people on a podcast with you or interviewing them on a live stream and that sort of thing. This is really where it depends on what type of content you're currently creating. If you don't have a podcast, maybe you're going hard on YouTube and you're doing a lot of social media content, well, still maybe interview them, but make sure that it's very much centered around your YouTube strategy or your social media strategy. And then when you post on social media, make sure you add them as a collaborator. Like now it's not just about tagging people, it's about adding them as a collaborator. But if I'm on somebody's show and they invite me to be a collaborator on their content that they posted on their Instagram and I accept that collaboration request, now it shows up to my followers and my audiences and people that are interested in me. We see this a lot with sports. We see this a lot with the music industry where, a band will release or an artist will release a new album and whatever the record company is will post it and collaborate with that artist. And now it shows up on both their feeds so that maybe the record company that produced the album is introducing people from their audiences to this new band that maybe they've never heard of before. That's kind of the method of which this works. So this is where it's not a very direct answer. However, obviously, it's creating content together. I see a lot of people in the real estate space that are in the influencers or coaches. They'll meet up at events and they'll see each other at events and that sort of thing. They'll go out in the lobby and shoot a bunch of videos together, whether it's social media videos, they interview each other, or they're just doing 5 to 10 minute YouTube videos specifically for YouTube. That's the way you want to collaborate. So think about, first of all, what type of content you're collaborating. if you don't have a podcast, then it doesn't make sense for you to, interview them for an hour or whatever, unless you're intentionally going to do that and then chop that into social media clips only or, YouTube content only, then you can think about it. But think about what type of content you create and then, ask them and just ask the person, like we said, from point number one, that's in your audience to come onto your content and then drive it forward that way. Of course, the other side of this is now you getting on other people's content to collaborate into their audiences. So it's one thing to get people on your content, but I think it should be a 1-2 punch. Make sure that you're getting people on your content, but you're actively looking to be a part of other people's content. I am actively looking to be on other podcasts where people are talking about either marketing for real estate investors. At the time of this recording, yesterday I was on a podcast and the interviewer has a data servicing for real estate investors, and he, interviews other people that are in the real estate investing space. And when I came on, I tell people, like, I'm not an active real estate investor. However, I do service people in the real estate investing space. I've been in this space for 13 years, been a part of 1,200 deals myself in the marketing field, and I know what I'm talking about here, and this is my niche. So I make that up front, but I'm actively looking to be on other people's podcasts. I'm actively looking to be a part of other people's social media content and that sort of thing, and being interviewed and whatnot. And that's another side of it that takes a little bit of work, but just actively be looking out for, if somebody on Facebook posts, I'm looking for more podcast guests, here's about my show, then I'm going to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking to be, a guest on somebody's podcast. Do you mind if I join up on yours? Make sure that you do that actively. So it's getting people to collaborate with you and you collaborating with people as well. Now, of course, during the content, some ethics that you really want to follow is making sure that you're not advertising and pitching like the whole time. It really should be a very, very minimal amount, and it should come naturally. If maybe you're on somebody's podcast and they ask you to promote or talk about your services or what you do, what you have to offer, then of course bring it up and talk about it then. But the worst thing in the world is and if this has only happened maybe 1 or 2 times where I get a guest on my show and all they do is pitch the whole time, those podcast recordings are still sitting in a library and will never see the light of day because there was no value that was in it. Maybe they dropped a couple of good pieces of information, but the whole time my audience is going to feel like they're being pitched to. And that's bad etiquette when it comes to collaborating on content. So make sure you bring the energy, make sure you are talking about things that that you should talk about, and that, sets a precedence as well as before you do the recording. Maybe talk to, your guest or talk to the person that's hosting you and say, like, if you're getting somebody to be a guest on your show, make sure you ask them, like, what is your expertise? And here's the things I found out about you, are these directions that we can go into when I'm interviewing you and that sort of thing. And I did another podcast on how to be a rockstar podcast host and a rockstar podcast guest. So make sure you go check those out because that'll give you some good insight there on etiquette. Just make sure that you're being active in, making sure you're delivering value and that sort of thing. And if you're interviewing somebody, they do the same. Now, of course, after the content happens, that's where a lot of it opens up. Now you can start like promoting it and you have the podcast going out. Now you have a bunch of clips that are being sprawled out everywhere across Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Facebook. Make sure you do actively, ask that person, hey, you are on my show. Once it goes live, would you mind if I send you some assets and you post it? You mind if I tag you up and, maybe share some content with you so that you can add me as a collaborator and that sort of thing? Is that okay? Get their verbal permission, and then you personally reach out to them once that stuff goes out. They're going to be highly more likely to say yes to that and share it with you. Now it's the beautiful, you're tapping into their audience and you're audience hacking. You're actually getting in front of their audiences and delivering value. And you have a good entry point because the door's open since those people follow that person that you hosted on your show. So make sure there's some activity afterwards and that you're putting out as much as you can that goes with them and not inundating. You shouldn't be putting out 2 posts a day specifically collaborating with that person. Maybe spread it out a little bit over a month. But, when it comes down to it, make sure you're active on that side as well. The last thing I would say is if you are collaborating one way or another and you do give some sort of a call to action, maybe, for me, when I go on somebody's show, I tell them, reach out to me, direct message me on Facebook or Instagram and say, this podcast host sent me here. I listened to your episode. I would love to hop on a call with you. I offer free 30-minute consultation calls with people as long as they come from a podcast that, they're listening to where I'm on as a guest. And so if somebody reaches out to me, I have an obligation to fulfill that promise to them. Make sure that you do that because then it reflects poorly on the host. If that person comes to me and says, I heard you on this person's show and you promised that you would do this, And if you don't follow up with them, if you don't actually do the thing that you say you're going to do, then that just sets a really, really bad kind of relationship when it comes to, the host and you and the guests for them, the audiences for them, and that sort of thing. So just make sure you follow up on any promises, whether it's a free book, free plus shipping offer on a book funnel, whether it's, some PDFs or a white paper or a one sheet or whatever it is. Make sure you follow up on it because that's very important. Obviously, for marketing purposes, now you can get them into your funnel at that point, but it also etiquette-wise stands tall. And you'd be shocked. There's people that I know that I personally have been told don't get that person on your podcast because they don't follow up with what they say they're going to do and that sort of thing. And so I actively try to, disregard them if they ever reach out and that sort of thing. And that goes around, word spreads. So that's the last thing I got for you. Hopefully that helps and makes sense. Collaborating on content is very important, and it's going to get you to be able to tap into other people's audiences actively and thoroughly. But there are some etiquettes to it. There are some good techniques to make sure that you do this. It's not just about podcasting. It's not just about social media. It's about everything when it comes to content. Make sure that you collaborate with other people that are in your space, can serve your audience, you can serve their audience, and it's just a win-win all the way around. So that's what I got for you guys today. Hopefully that helped and made sense. If it did, make sure you leave a comment down below. I do check all those comments and reply to them, so I would love to hear your thoughts on it. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook, Josh Culler, and I am verified. Send me a message and say I listened to your episode about collaborating, and I'd love to chat with you more and maybe see if you could help me out with something. And I'd be more than happy to send that your way, of course, delivering on that promise. But other than that, make sure you subscribe, like this video. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. See ya.